everyone. Today is Tuesday, March 18th, and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for the day. My name is Christine Novello. I'm the chairperson of the meeting, and I'm also the association treasurer as well as a governing board director. So again, welcome. Call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Please, if you're able to join me in rising, let's recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone. We do have a quorum today. We are missing 3 of our members today. Chris Waller, Mickey Jacobs, and Jim Scott are all on fabulous vacations. But this is the Budget and Finance Committee. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about us and meet each of the members, we introduced ourselves in full at our September 3rd meeting in 2024, our first meeting. So just head over there if you're here or if you're at home and you'd like to know us a little bit more and know who is who. There's a full round of introductions there. September 3rd, 2024 meeting if you'd like to know a little bit more. But again, we do have quorum today, and I will now read the meeting procedures that accompany every meeting. The governing board and its committees conduct all their meetings in compliance with Arizona Planned Community Association open meeting laws per ARS 33-1804 and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures, as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order, will also be followed in all meetings as appropriate, consistent with Bylaw 3.07, Procedures for Owner-Member Meetings, and Standing Rules number 2 and number 3. So with that, we have completed our entirety of Section 1 of our agenda. We'll move on to Section 2, the approval of minutes from our March 4th, 2025 meeting. Did anyone see, on the committee, anyone see any issues or concerns? So I believe we have consensus to approve those minutes. Thank you. We'll move on to new business. January, February 2025 year-to-date financial review. Thank you, Cliff. We missed our January updates due to timing, but now we get to see where we are year-to-date.
Thank you and good morning, Director Novello and committee and community. I'm going to present the February year-to-date financial statements. Attached to this is the January and February financials. So if you need to look at that in more detail, just refer to those. Typical agenda for us, we're going to go through the monthly and year-to-date financials comparative, move down to the capital section as well, monthly year-to-date compared to prior year and budget. And then we'll take a look at the capital improvement expenditures and then finally the fully funded balance impact. So looking at the monthly income from operations, we finished out about $6,000 favorable compared to budget on the revenue side. And then also we made up a little bit of ground in golf in February, which was good, which we needed. So we'll see how March kind of shakes out. We're a little bit behind with the weather events that we've had in terms of golf rounds and revenue as we stand today, but we'll see how we finish out for the rest of the month. On the expense side, $77,000 favorable. A lot of this is timing, so we'll just kind of see how we finish out the rest of the year on the expenses moving forward. Overall, $83,000 favorable with the operating and revenue and expense favorability. Compared to prior year, about $75,000 favorable. As you can see, for the month, just $30,000 unfavorable on operating expenses. So again, that effort to keep expenses down is paying off. So looking year to date, tracking a little bit behind. I talked about golf. We made up some ground, but we're still behind in our golf revenue. and we are struggling in our recreation events. Our events have been impacted by weather as well, and to be honest, we're not getting the participation there that we have in the past. And I think some of the disposable income that's impacted with the economy, and some disposable income is maybe drying up, but we're taking a look at our different acts and what's been successful and what we have to continue to work on. We've had some turnover in the department as well, so we're working on that. We're focused on the events department. We'll see how we finish out for the rest of the year. With the weather we have, we should be able to make up some ground there, but we'll see. But 188,000 unfavorable on 19.2 million budget. And then on the expense side, still tracking that favorability in wages, benefits, and taxes, which is the bulk of the favorability. Down the legal, professional ops, and other, that's there's some service contracts that we put in the budget for some IT enhancements that we didn't move forward with this year because of the timing of us hiring our new general manager as well as our new IT director. So some of those initiatives kind of got backburnered. So those will flow into the operating as savings for the year. We will spend some of that, but most of that will fall in. And then the other side is, again, that security camera project. We still have about 40,000 on the books that we need to expense as we finish that project in the year. But 906,000 favorable on the expense side year to date in February. Overall, 718,000 favorable compared to budget. We're almost in the black at 128,000 negative for the year. So we'll see the tables turn on that for the next few months, and we'll see how everything shakes out. 309,000 favorable compared to prior year at 128,000 cash outflow year to date versus 437 prior year. Okay, moving down to the capital section. Got some good news to report. We made up some ground on the APF fees. We're actually tracking right at budget. Little favorable to budget, but we'll get to the year to date. But it was a good month in February, and March seems to be shaping up pretty well. And then in terms of the investment account, right on budget with estimated reserve fund allocation, and favorable to budget on investment income. We'll have a presentation from Cap Trust on the reserve fund investments, but with the interest rates staying high and the long term still through February, it was above 4.4. I think it was 4.6. I forget what it was, but that's creating some nice interest and dividends for us in our investment portfolio at 93,000. And then the other side of that is the long term is stabilizing, or did stabilize in the month of February. So that created some favorable valuation change to the positive of 430,000. So 559,000 overall down in the capital section, favorable. Compared to prior year, you can see 114,000 favorable on APFs. Investment income up 22,000, and then that unrealized gain was a positive 658 compared to a 228,000 negative valuation change last February. Year to date, again, right on APFs at 22,000 favorable, right on estimated reserve fund allocation. The investment income is tracking better at 72,000 favorable, and then net realized and unrealized valuation change of approximately 650,000. So with the 650,000 and the 730,000, 36,000 investment income, the reserve fund is performing very well through the month of February. We'll see how it tracks as we move throughout the year. Overall, 914,000 favorable to budget and 329,000 favorable to prior year. Again, talked about the APF fees. We're running right on with prior year, 205,000 favorable, and then that reserve fund valuation change is positive for us over prior year by 300,000. So overall, revenues and expenses were 1.6 million favorable at almost 1.8 million for the year positive. The budget, and then 638,000 favorable to prior year. All right, so let's move down to the capital expenditure section. We've got the summary of capital expenditures in this budget. We've got 9.9 million. The variance to budget right now is positive at 377,000 for all the closed projects or PO'd projects. That list is here of each one of those. One thing I'll point out is that there's a paving project at Desert Trails. I'm trying to find it on the list here. Is it on the next page, maybe? Oh, there it is, 135,000. You can see that. We met with our, we went to bid it out and met with the potential vendors to do that project, and each one of them said that this parking lot is fine. So we moved that down on the reserve schedule, and we're going to align that with some things we want to do over at Desert Trails later and do it at the same time. But the parking lot's in good shape, and there's a couple of little maintenance things we can take care of, but we feel like we can get some more significant useful life out of that. So we're going to do that on that project, which creates a savings of 135,000 in the budget, and then overall right now, like I said, tracking at 377 or 12. So when we look at the allowances, there's through the month of February, there's approximately 213,000 still available for allowances that's unspent. Some of that has been spent in March, so but we'll report that next month. But it's probably closer to 100,000 after the Echo Mesa, after we finish the Echo Mesa project, which we went to facts and findings for. But here's a detailed list. There are some Echo Mesa items in there, but they're not all of them. That's the detailed list of the allowance spent. So let's take a look at the fully funded balance. I can't really overstate this, so I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's all about the fully funded balance and the FFB percent. It really is. It's kind of that factor that we have to look at that's outside of operations but impacts our operations, and it impacts everything that we do. So it's very important that we look at this and make sure that we're tracking where we need to track. And some of these numbers are, when it comes to the fully funded balance, we've done a presentation here, but the fully funded balance changes daily. We use a point in time when we put the budget together, but when we put that budget together last, call it January, the fully funded balance has changed multiple times. The assets have come on and off, moved down. There's just a lot of different things that happen. There's allowance projects that get done throughout the year for assets that we thought we were going to get the useful life out of, which impacts the reserve study as well. But happy to report we're on pace for 47, and we'll see how the year progresses. That concludes my February financial report.
Thank you, Cliff. I'm sure we'll have questions. Just while we have the fully funded balance slide up, I believe it's FI4, our policy is that we are 40% or greater. That's our target, and that's actually a pretty liberal target. There are a lot of organizations that have a higher target than we do, but we're able to do that because we have such a healthy inflow and management, right?
Yes.
Just so that we're all aware again, like I'm a broken record too about this, but it's very important to keep on pace, and that we are always keeping an eye on that target number, right? Yep. It is going to change, but that is the target's what's important, right?
Yeah, and one important thing too is that the reserve fund not only funds the reserve study, but it funds new capital projects and enhancements that aren't currently on the reserve study. So right. That's why we need to have that, at least 40%, because we have to be able to, do enhancements and do new capital items. And, you know, the fact of the matter is a lot of things that weren't a capital item in the past, like even equipment and things like that have become, the price has gone up so much that we have to add those items because you do get a 5-year useful life out of them. But now the price of a water heater, for example, at one of the pools is now, it used to be $3,700 and now it's $5,200. So there's just things like that happen that we have to add to our reserve study. So at the end of the day, everything funnels into the reserve fund. So whatever you have left in operating excess, or whatever you have left after you pay for all your capital projects, funds into the reserve fund. So at the end of the day, it is one pot of money. You have to spend it differently based on the policies. But so if it comes out of operating or if it comes out of the reserve fund or capital improvement projects, either way, it impacts the reserve fund.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Thank you. Couple of things before I turn it over to the committee to ask. You mentioned the Desert Trails parking lot. That is good news. I noticed that it is considered to be completed. Therefore, I'm assuming that means it's not even in the project. We're not delaying that project. Rather, we're saying we don't need to do it at this time, and we're going to include any of that pro shop repair into another capital reserve item. Did I misunderstand? Why would it be marked completed otherwise?
So it's only marked completed in that we're not doing it. It's just not, we're not going to pay for that this year. It's still in the reserve study, so it's not reset in the reserve study. It's moved down in the reserve study. It is delayed then. Okay. It is delayed, yes.
And on the topic of our recreation events department revenues, that's a pretty significant decline. I know how hard the team is working. That's not a reflection of the team. I just encourage the operating team to take a look at pricing for those events. I just hear anecdotally that there's some pushback for whatever reason on the ticket prices and so forth. And I think that amount is starting to become more significant. So
yeah. So this speaks to why it's so important when we put a budget together that we look at member dues, because member dues are guaranteed, and golf, events, bowling, all that's impacted by the market and what's going on in the market, and we can't over rely or over depend on those revenue sources because they're subjected to outside forces that we have no control over. Or have little control over. We can make changes, we can do things like that. But the cost of those services go up too. So the cost of the bands, the cost of the acts, the cost of, if we have to rent equipment, that all goes up. So, when we're looking at pricing that, we have to, there's a balance there, and so we are assessing that. But yeah, I just want to take that opportunity to explain the importance of our member dues, how they fit into our operating revenue.
And we're a good portion of the way through the year now. I think it's important. One of the things that's very helpful to have this presentation so close to our discussions around our next round of discussions for budget is that we as a committee are going to need to weigh in on key assumptions that are driving next year's forecasts and budgets, right? So bear that in mind as well. These are smaller revenue items, but I'm looking at the APF trends and so forth, all very positive, which is good news for us, I think, as we consider those. And you mentioned one more point that I get a lot of questions about. I'm going to go out there and say, probably members of the committee do as well. There's always questions at this time of year about why do we take input, receive input on dues that we know we're going to be passing along back into the reserve fund, right? The reason why we do some of that, in my view, and I'd love your opinion, right? If we talk a lot about the forecasted projects for the next few years, we know we have a huge project that we will be considering for budget, and that's our next round of irrigation projects for next year. So part of this is it will flow into the reserve fund, and we expect that it will come back out relatively quickly. So that's the reason why it's almost like a way of saving, if you will, savings for an expenditure we know we have coming up very quickly. That's my anecdotal, quick explanation. Am I on track with that?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of a whole ecosystem when it comes to our cash inflows and how we collect or what our cash inflows are. So we have to look at all of them, and APFs are a wonderful resource for us. It's just a wonderful, thing that we have where we can collect a fee when a house closes, and that can be used to pay for our capital improvement projects. Unfortunately, that's not the only that's not enough to cover our capital improvement projects. So especially when we have a big irrigation project down the line. So we have to plan and model that out. And we have to do it in a way that we don't want to try and do it all in 1 year. Okay, so we always try to build, and this is a couple years ago. It came out of the governing board wanted to see us do this reserve fund allocation, and that's the 7.5% to 8% that we budget every year from our owner member and associate member dues, and so we earmark that, and then we can put a balanced budget together after we take that out, and we call that out because we want the community to know that a portion of your dues are going to pay for capital improvement projects as well, not just operation. Now it's overall dues and fees. So any excess from any of the other areas also get moved down into the reserve fund per policy. But we try and budget that in a way that we're planning for those capital projects down the line. And it's APFs can't cover everything. But I will say that member dues and your portion of your member dues, industry standard is 15 to 40% of your member dues would go into a reserve fund. Well, we only budget 7.5% because we have APF fees to fund that reserve fund. So we are blessed to be able to have that resource, because if we didn't, we'd have to collect those from our other dues and fees. So that would be, 90%, 93% of our revenue comes from dues and golf. So we would have to increase our rates even higher if we didn't have APF. So it's a blessing to have those APF fees, and yes, we do have to plan for all of those things. And we have a reserve study that helps us do that.
Excellent. Well, any other questions from the committee on our February year-to-date? We'll start with David. Any questions?
No.
Rick?
Were some of those things were canceled in February because of weather? Is that why some of those are down and they've been rescheduled?
Yes, they were rescheduled, but we also, if the weather's not nice, people just in general don't participate. Even our spring fling, we had to actually reschedule, and then we've processed a ton of refunds already because people are going out of town or not available that weekend. So we're trying to circle back and do a marketing push to try and make that balance out. But yeah, that's when the weather impacts, it definitely impacts the revenue, and it just impacts the overall, because if you go pay for a ticket and you go and the weather's bad, that just puts a bad taste in your mouth.
Well, the other thing is, do we do any evaluation of those things that were popular, things that weren't popular? Do we delay them? Do we don't bring them back? Do we try something new? Is that an ongoing study that we do that?
We analyze that internally. We try. It's hard because we try and hit different demographics in our community, and our demographics change. So a lot of times, we schedule events that are popular overall and others that are less popular. And there's an amenity component there. So the pricing, for example, we try and keep that reasonable. And even so, there's obviously complaints out there that were too expensive. So, there's a balance there. But you know, Casey does a really good job with the resources that she has, and I will say she's unfortunately had some turnover in that department, and that doesn't help either. So, but yeah, we're assessing and evaluating that.
You know, again, anecdotally, for some of the feedback that I've received from residents around that, the having to reschedule, it's so hard. You know, people were disappointed, but last year, you know, speaking personally, I was one of the people who was sitting outside in the 40-degree driving rain, thunderstorm, trying to help some folks who really needed a lot of help to get back to safety. It was the right call, and in my individual opinion, it was a good call, and also allowing refunds while it's going to be a financial hit for us was very appreciated by those who commented to me. So thank you. John?
A couple questions. Good numbers. Have you updated your forecast? I remember last time we were here, we were projecting maybe a $40,000 operating bottom line. Is that going up because of these good months?
I would say that, you know, we are a washout away from in golf rounds, so I wouldn't feel comfortable adjusting the forecast because we really don't know at this point what's going to happen with golf. With it being the middle of March, we still have the rest of this month and April, where the weather could really impact our budget, really impact our top line. So I would not make an adjustment to the forecast at this point.
Optimistic?
Yes.
That's a good accounting answer.
Yes,
I'm
we're
not going to
optimistic.
adjust it at this time.
Yeah.
Cautiously optimistic or
Yes,
something.
gosh, that's right. That's right. You know, we're conservative by nature.
That's good.
And we need to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Protected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the second question, talking about getting questions, we don't get to see the golf statement to know how golf is doing, and the pavilion statement, which I got to see I went to the budget meeting and learned that they make money and contribute, but I don't know the answer to golf. But I hear all the time out there, golf doesn't make money. Does our operating revenue cover our operating expenses for golf?
So no.
Okay.
So when you look at golf, typically we budget about $100. If it's about a little over $1 million, $1.1 million in operating outflow.
Okay.
Okay. And that's because golf is an amenity, just like pools and the library and all these clubs, all that. So there's an amenity component to our golf courses. Fortunately, we can subsidize that amenity with non-member play, and we do that to the tune in this budget of about $3.2 million. So fortunately, again, we have this additional inflow for golf that allows us to keep rates down with our golf. So we don't budget golf to break even. We don't budget because golf is, again, considered an amenity. And if we did that, we'd have to increase golf rates.
Right.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we've got 7 golf courses. If we didn't have that $3.2 million from the public, we would be subsidizing that $3.2 million in some form or fashion with either increased golf rates for our members or increased dues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Ed, any questions or comments?
Yeah, Cliff, sports pavilion income looks like it's about 9% now over budget. I know we're going to have this big project to improve the aging equipment that we've got. Now, it's pretty busy. Are we going to anticipate any increased income after that project's completed?
I would say no. There's going to be some expense savings because the equipment, the pin setters currently are taking a lot of resources to keep and maintain. So there'll be some efficiencies there, but no, there won't be any additional or incremental revenue from those new pin setters that we could budget for at least.
Okay.
But yeah, bowling has done very well this year, and we put a bowling increase in the budget and to help pay for those things, but bowling's going to have a cash outflow of about $100,000 this year, which is
Okay.
that'll help pay for those projects like Lizard Acres in this year's budget, and the new lanes from a couple years ago, and the pin setters. Again, there's an amenity component there as well, and we try to keep the rates down, and our members should pay very deeply discounted rates for golf and bowling because their dues are subsidized.
Okay. Now I've got not a dollar question, but a communication question. Last meeting, I heard that Sun City got a variance for not having to do all the irrigation on the golf courses that the state told us we had to do. To me, that's kind of a black cloud over Sun City. And I know we do, we're very well respected and everything, but it just seems like that's another plus we can put on our plus side, because knowing government, what's true today isn't going to be true tomorrow. And I think we're looking a lot smarter than some of our competitors or friends across the street.
Yeah, so they got a variance on, they got an extended time period, but they still have to do that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they have a deadline to drop dead date.
Yeah, so they got some leniency on when they have to be done, but they ultimately have to be done.
Okay.
So yeah, no, they didn't.
So we know that so many years from now they have to.
Oh yeah, I don't know exactly what the
Okay.
Extended period of time
Okay,
is, but
all right.
they did get
So-
a reprieve on the date, but they still have to do those projects.
Okay, so
absolutely.
it's a known. Okay.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They still have to do them, and they have to fund them, and
Yeah,
there's a lot of work.
Because that has a big thing to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're way ahead of the curve.
No,
and
I
Tom
know.
and
I've seen the numbers that
Todd
Sun
and
City-
Todd and prior committees and governing boards have done a great job of really communicating that to the community, and we've got them funded and ready to go. So, absolutely.
Some people say that we charge by owner, they charge by roof, and that why is this, why and that? I just think they need to know what's ahead for them too.
Oh, absolutely. If you're a single person and you live in this community, you're paying less in dues than if you lived in Sun City.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And yeah, we don't wish any of our neighbors any ill, but we did a great job. Past management and governing boards, hats off to them to keeping us on pace. So any questions from our owner residents here in the room? We do have one online. Gary Bach, 135435. I believe Cliff said that inputs to the reserve from dues are spent differently than APF fees. Can you please explain that again?
Yes, so we have, let's call them two kinds of revenue. We've got operating revenue, which is our dues and fees. So the bowling fees, the golf fees, the guest fees, the membership dues, that's all operating revenue. And per policy, operating revenue pays for the operating budget. So those are non-capital improvement items. That's a separate budget. So when you have your operating revenue and you pay for your operating expenses, we budget a portion of the dues to go into a reserve fund allocation. So we essentially reduce the amount that we report in dues revenue and put that down in the capital section as a reserve fund injection. So then we balance the budget with all those operating expenses after we fund the allocation. So that creates a operating budget, balanced operating budget with a reserve fund injection. And then that gets trued up ultimately when the year finishes, and whatever's left in excess plus the reserve fund allocation goes into the reserve fund. The other items that go into the reserve fund, or the cash flow items that go into the reserve fund, are APF fees, reserve fund change, valuation change, interest income goes down in there. Any contributed capital that we get. So, for example, we got some grants from the Arizona Office of Tourism for irrigation projects. Those all flow into the reserve fund as well. we have to keep those funds separate. So anything down in the capital section goes directly into the reserve fund. Anything in the operating section pays for operations first, and then whatever's left over goes in the reserve fund. And then that fund funds your capital projects. So you take your inflows for the year minus your outflows or your capital projects, and then whatever's left over will be sent to the reserve fund because we fund everything through operating. But if there's a deficit, then we pull from the reserve fund into operating to cover the deficit. And that's how we manage our reserve fund.
Thanks again, Cliff. It can be complicated, so thanks for making it as simple as we can, but keep those questions coming. Mr. Bach, if we have not answered your question, just put in for a clarification. We'll circle back to that at the end. Seeing no other questions, we're going to move on, and thank you, Cliff. We're going to move on to 3.02 in our agenda. This is where we're talking about our proposed capital improvement plan while we're waiting for Carl to come up. Just a quick intro for the committee. I too sound like a broken record, but the point of this process is to ask, of course, review any changes, to ask questions. At our April 1st meeting, we will formulate a recommendation as a committee to the governing board. Do we approve everything, or do we pull out some items for special review? It doesn't mean that we are denying them or pulling them out of the budget, but rather they either need more detail, we recommend something different. April 1st at our next meeting, that is when we will do that. I will explain the process for that in a little bit, but first we're going to, again, pay special attention today to anything that has changed and any explanations, because the goal here is to make sure that we're prepared to make those recommendations. So Carl, without further ado, why don't you walk us through any key changes?
Good morning, committee, and thank you, Director Novello. Good morning, audience. We met a couple weeks ago for Budget and Finance and reviewed any changes from February to March. We only had a couple. I will review that today. In our color blocks for the FY2025-26 proposed capital projects, our tan section is new capital. The difference between February and March, the RCSCW website redesign and phone app was added for $300,000. That also created a deletion in our allowance category, which I'll talk about in a moment. So we had 520,000 categorized for allowances. We reduced that to 420, which is our yearly average, due to defining or closely defining what this project is. We also had in our R&R for the Recreation Division a change from February to March. We added 25,000 for workstations, basically desks, in our HR and marketing and PR departments due to new staffing and rearrangement of staff. And finally, in items that were discussed between February and March, the Properties Committee having discussions with our tennis club requested that the tennis court windscreens be delayed due to their perceived good condition. So we discussed that, we agreed, and $75,000 was moved to the deferred list. As you all know, over the last few months of discussion, the softball outfield electronic scoreboard was removed from the budget due to the softball field and the governing board's approval of Liberty Buick funding that scoreboard, so it was not needed in the budget. And then the last item that was deferred and changed was a pool circulation pump. Russ Boston's Facilities Maintenance Department said it is not necessary until future years. Those are the only changes between February to March. And I'm here for, if you have any questions, to help you make decisions for your April committee meeting.
Thank you again, Carl. it's amazing how few changes we had actually coming into this, but again, just goes to good planning on everybody's count. We spent a lot of time in our last meeting talking about some of these. I can see in the presentation deck, there's additional information which is helpful. So just to call everybody's attention if you didn't see it, some of the items like the website redesign project, for example, does have more specificity at our request, so thank
Happy
you.
to.
But for the committee, I'll turn it to you guys first in terms of key questions. Again, remember, we're going to, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to start making some, if you will, identifying some specifics. So this is a great opportunity, not our last chance to ask questions, but our best chance to ask some questions of the entire team on the capital improvement items. So I believe, let's see. Let's start this time with Ed. Ed, did anything pop out that you wanted to ask some questions about on the Capitol?
No, to me, this process is kind of like rereading a novel, and I've reread it so many times, and I've had such good explanation and communication that no more questions.
Thank you. John?
I have no questions.
Rick?
We talked about this website redesign, and I'd like to know how this fits into the strategic plan on all of the IT improvements we're going to make over the next couple of years. Is this just the first step, or how does it all fit in strategically? Because we have operational issues with IT, we have capital improvements, all of that. I'd like to know how it all fits together.
Good morning. So good question. Excuse me. So at the governing board meeting this Thursday, the strategic plan is up for approval at that point. And on there are many different projects and initiatives, including IT projects and initiatives. And those are in addition to, and because I don't recall, do we have an actual one for the website? I believe we do, as one of the projects and initiatives. Yeah. So they're in addition to this one, which was a directive by the governing board to me that this is something that they wanted. We have many other projects and initiatives related to IT in there as well. So this is just the beginning to get things kind of started, along with other types of projects. For example, looking at integration in a lot of our systems, efficiencies. Some that are not just ones that are going to be noticeable by the members, but also just internally to make us more efficient. There's a lot of processes and things that we do internally that involve a lot of paper that we're going to try to work towards eliminating. So this is, again, just one of many things on the strategic plan that is going to be moving forward. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but hopefully it did.
And this, Stephen, again, just to reemphasize, is not the, I do not believe it is expected to be the final round of updates to our website and our app. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's, this is just sort of to get us going. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, it's sort of the chicken and the egg. So, you could, we could be given direction to go out, scope it, find out what it's going to cost, figure out what all the alternatives are, and then come back and bring a actual amount to ask for. Or we can do what we're doing here, which is to, we're looking at what we believe will at least be an amount that can get us started towards accomplishing some of our goals. And then will it involve more? I believe it will. I mean, it's going to definitely involve more. Will it involve more for the website and for the app, potentially? But it's definitely going to involve more for other systems in general. The goal here, though, really is if we don't do something in this budget, then we're looking at quite a ways off before you really get anything accomplished. That's the reason why we have this amount. And we recognize that this amount is a little bit, it's a shot in the dark. We don't know exactly what it's going to cost. We know that it's going to cost some money to get us going on this direction, but what we'd rather do is at least get things started and working in the right direction, and then that may mean coming back at some point and looking at additional funding, or at least give us a better idea for the next fiscal year what more money will be.
Understood.
All well and good. The only thing I'm concerned about is integration to the whole IT structure, because we choose one thing for the website, Next thing you know is we choose something else for the operational side, and they don't go together. You have to build interfaces and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm really worried about, because I want, everybody complains about dues going up, capital going up, all that kind of stuff. I want to see where we can get the most efficiency out of the IT group, because that to me is where it starts from.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's the point here, is that that's exactly what we're looking at, is what can we do to make things more integrated and more efficient? To me, there's nothing better than, especially nowadays, than having an IT solution to make us more efficient. And generally there is, both internally as well as for our members. And that's what we're looking at. And that's why, again, Kyle's done a great job already of sort of getting things moving in the right direction, but integration is the big key. We want to make sure that we're not having 50 million systems. We want to have as few as possible. There's going to have to be some different systems and some integration with other, so they can talk to each other. But that's, as we go along, we'll figure out what that looks like. But what we want to do, at least get started here, is provide a better member experience for them through a website that is tailored towards the members more than it is now, and then an app that hopefully will provide a greater interaction with them, so they can do things like book a tea time and buy tickets and things through an app, rather than having to go to the website all the time, because that's what people are expecting nowadays.
Well, I hope you include training of the homeowners on how to use this thing, because
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you spend all this money and people don't use it. They still want to do the whole manual thing.
Yeah.
I know I've been there and done that, but I'm asking these questions because I think the demographics of this community are changing.
Yep.
And they're moving more towards this. But still, you need the training and like how to use this. So is that included in some of this, or?
Yeah, but we'll certainly do that. As we roll things out, we will certainly provide training to members. And we're certainly sensitive to the fact that not everybody is moving this direction either. There's still a demographic that's not going to be looking to use this type of technology, and making sure that we're not leaving them behind, that there are still options for them as well, and that we're making a good experience for them as well. But absolutely, as we move things out, that'll be part of the process, is education and marketing and training and all the things that people need in order to get to where they can use this to their benefit, rather than looking at it going, well, I don't know what to do with this. Now you have this, and what do I do? We certainly are here to support our members and provide that to them.
Okay. I'm good.
Great points. Thanks for asking, David.
Rick took many of my questions that I had on my list out, but I'm going to expand upon those though, because I still have real concerns about this amount of money and the priority. I haven't seen what the strategic plan is, so for me to make that judgment is premature, because we need to see where you're thinking about strategically. But my questions still remain a little bit on this IT component, and that what is the priority of when you mentioned those other items, looking at an integrated system, which is the foundational to the whole operation, that interface in with this website. You do have interfaces listed there. You have member portal, that's an interface. You have tea times, that's an interface. You have event ticketing, that's an interface. If you change those systems later on, that interface generally costs about $100,000 per interface. So my question is, are you putting the cart before the horse here and trying to prioritize? I understand the need to upgrade the website and some of these things, but I think with the premise that you're going to have these, and then there may not be able to, you may have to update or change those because of the foundational integrated system you eventually develop. That to me what makes me wonder about where the priorities are. Do we look at the integration system first? Do we look at integrated system first before we do this work? Or is this such a high priority that this has to be done, but recognizing that come back around, you may have to then spend more money to do new interfaces with those new integrated system?
I think it's, I'm sorry to, before the general manager, just remember, first of all, the strategic plan was outlined, or the process was outlined at our last workshop meeting, and will be reviewed again on Thursday for review and approval. There's no secret there. This is a very high priority, as decided upon by the governing board, just so that part. Go ahead now, Stephen, if you would.
Let me just clarify, Christian. I'm
Sure.
totally for the IT. We
Oh,
need
no,
to move that way. I don't want to, I'm not trying to say we got to stay there, but I'm just concerned about.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
And my experience
Sure.
is that it's, You have to start somewhere. The team is choosing at the direction of the governing board to start with the members first, all right? Just so you know where some of that came from, members first, because the underlying systems are very well entrenched and would take a lot of effort, if any, decision was made to replace them, so.
Yeah, just going the integration portion. Yeah, we do want to keep everything kind of open-ended. We want to keep our options open. I think we're looking at TEI, what we currently have, integrating that to the cloud system that they have at TEI, which a lot of the member portal would kind of be through.
Please
that.
define what that is.
That's our point of sale system. So the T times and the member dues are already through there, and they do have a members portal. So we want to kind of link up anything here for the members. We want to link up to that. So it's the same sign-on that they currently use for the systems. So we are looking at the integrations like that. And we just switched over to a new event ticketing system, Purple Pass. So we want to make sure that's integrable. So that's kind of already there for the future. So a lot of these things are kind of already in place, or we know what systems will integrate with others. So we are putting it in consideration now. We definitely don't want to do something that we're not sure we're going to have in the future, and then we have to redo it in a year or two. So we are taking that into consideration.
I wasn't trying to steal your thunder at all, David. Great questions from the entire committee. I just wanted you to know where some of the starting points had come from the governing board. Anything else? They're all excellent points. Tough decisions for all of us. And thank you again,
Thank you.
gentlemen. You might want to stay where you are, though, because there's another question that's coming in on IT. Just save you guys a little bit of steps. I'm going to throw it open now to any of our residents, owner members that may be here in the room. Seeing none yet, I'll go to online question first from Gary Bach, 135435. For the IT project, can we get prices first and then have a special governing board meeting to approve the amount before our next budget for 26-27? It's to answer from my perspective and then to toss it to our general manager. That's a possibility that the governing board could consider, I suppose, but it's very difficult because, again, for the operations team, they still need to spend some money in order to get those estimates. So it is something the governing board will have to decide in terms of how we want to proceed. But actually getting some kind of a formal bid back for the kind of work that's being outlined could be challenging. It's something that the governing board will definitely consider in terms of how the funding will be allocated. But to the general manager?
Yeah, so I think you just answered that. I mean, it would be a challenge, and it would be difficult, very difficult operationally for us to put together a scope of work and actually get bids. It would be rushed, and when you rush, you don't have as good of outcomes. So our goal here is to really be intentional about how we move forward, and so that we are obviously being good stewards of the members' funds, so that we don't hopefully make mistakes. As much as possible, we want to make sure that we are being very thorough as we go through this process of looking at our systems and looking at how we integrate them. Because again, could we do that? Sure. We could absolutely do that. But would it be prudent? I don't believe it would. I think we would end up looking back and saying, we should have probably not rushed through that whole process, because it's going to be a process, and Kyle's done a fantastic job. He is, though, just a couple months since January, into this position. He's still getting familiar himself with all the systems, and he's done a great job of doing that. He needs that in order to be able to make those assessments and make those determinations of what it looks like to go forward using his past experience. So I'd be really hesitant to do anything that involved us rushing into and getting a scope of work and getting it priced out in order to move forward during this budget cycle would be very difficult.
Right. And similarly, if I may add, from my perspective on the board, is that similarly, it's difficult to rush into the decision. So everyone is trying to be as thoughtful as possible, while also being sure that we can make some kind of a very comprehensive step forward. So to answer not just Mr. Bach's questions, but any other questions that we may have as a community, we're not 100% sure how we're going to go forward. It's I believe we're all grateful to at least see some discussion here about making a forward change without waiting another year and a half. So how we do this still remains to be seen. We don't want to rush, but we also want to make a forward step. So I think that was the biggest non-answer that I could manage, but
No, but I think it's
just
that's
know
a
we're
right
not
answer,
going to
though.
rush on either side,
No, I
right?
think
We
that's the
need to
right
be
answer, though.
thoughtful.
Yeah, because to your point, we want to be able to move forward, and that if we don't move something right now, we're going to then be putting this off for some time. And again, we can do it that way. I just don't think it's the best way to move forward. I mean, we don't know what exactly we're going to end up looking at,
Right.
but
There are other options
but
for
yeah, there's
moving forward
options. Yeah,
that the
so-
governing board can and will consider, in addition to the one that was put forward in chat. There are others, but it's great to be having the discussions. We will, again, we're on track to be making our decisions in in the next few months of governing board meetings, so more to come.
Yeah, and we're really, fortunate to have Kyle on board and with his leadership and just the mindset of the entire team is how do we be more efficient and how do we get to systems that are better experiences for our members and make us more efficient and overall, hopefully eventually even make us have some cost savings as well. That's part of the goal as well, is looking at ways that we can do things that reduce costs eventually in the long run. So that is something that should not be rushed into.
Thank you. Ed has a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, when we go out and look at other communities, who's gone through this and developed an app for their community? And do we have anything, knowledge of that or what they've experienced?
Yeah, I think that we've looked at Sun City. I think you looked at theirs. Did they have an app? I don't know if they have an app or not. So so they've done their website. And I think they're.
I could speak to that.
Yeah,
I talked to their finance director, and they're going through the process now, and they've earmarked $300,000 for their website. They use TEI as well, their point of sale system, and they're looking to do the same things we are, creating a better member experience that integrates with all the various systems that they use as well. So, and that's what they have in their budget for that project.
But they have an app? Does the villages have an app?
So-
Does Robertson?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been using, as an example, we trying to sell our home in Wickenburg Ranch still. Wickenburg Ranch has an app, and through that app, you're able to book a tea time. You're able to look at your member statement, essentially the equivalent of our member credit. You're able to look up other members through a directory if you opt into that. You can book reservation for the restaurant. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do through that app directly. So yes, they definitely exist, and it's just finding the right fit for us and the most benefit for us.
Any other questions from owner members? We have a lot to do, that's for sure. Oh, it looks like Carl has a final point, or? Oh, we're not, but before you wrap up, I'm going to give a little bit of explanation as well, sir. Team, we have a lot of presentations, a lot of paper, but online stuff as well. I want to also call our attention, we've all spent a lot of time because it came up relatively recently on the website and on technology, something that's near and dear to everybody's heart. But Carl, unless you were going to get to this, I wanted to point out one of the items in our packet. It's our sports pavilion, right? Our job, just to kind of back up another step, is we're looking at capital improvement items that are over 50,000. But some of these smaller items, when you look, really need to be looked at in aggregate. And if you, there's one for the sports pavilion that really requires an all-inclusive budget approval. I don't know if you were going to get to that, Carl.
Yeah, so I can, we've received a lot of comments, in our budget, a lot of questions that have helped provide the responses that I get to provide each month. So just a little bit of a refresher on the sports pavilion proposed capital items. Obviously, we have the R.H. Johnson pin setters for $892,874. We have the 2 oiling machines at $62,348 each. And then we have the other components that support the operations of those bowling lanes. Gutter systems, capping, subway ball track, foul lights are all original components to the lanes. They're 35+ years old. And all components listed require an all-inclusive budget approval. The reason that we break these items down that are less than $50,000 are so that we're transparent and to show you that all of these items are part of the overall project plan for renovation. And then the standalone item is masking graphic units for $26,000. So your consideration is to please remember that all components in the upper section, 53,000 to 12,609, are an all-inclusive budget approval recommendation.
Thank you. For Budget and Finance Committee, between now and our next meeting, I'll be sending out something to help prompt a preview, if you will. It will take us hours to go through every line here and to have everybody talk about what they would like to see us review. So we're going to do some of that in advance by actually selecting the items off the list in advance so we can come to April 1st with a consolidated list of the items that, if any, that we would like to consider for pulling out for future review. And then we'll discuss those and finalize and make a recommendation at our next meeting.
Director Novell, if I could just impress upon the committee that these items that I just discussed are also in our repair and replacement portion of our budget, which means these are assets on our books. The money has been saved through the reserve funds, and they are due for replacement. So as opposed to the mindset of new, where we have the potential of deferring or not approving, repair and replacement items are kind of critical to stay.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's still something that we take our diligence in reviewing, and goes all the way back to September when we were doing those walkthroughs with you and the team and the Properties Committee, which were so helpful. So just know for the Budget and Finance Committee members, that's what you'll be seeing in email coming up probably later this week so that we can get started on some of that. We also wanted to ensure that we could reflect a fuller contribution from all of our members, since we are missing 3 of our members for travel. When we come back on our next meeting, April 1st, we'll have a fuller representation and we can make our recommendation then. Excellent. Thanks so much. We're going to move on then to item 3.03, shifting gears to our annual financial plan, our budget, or our sometimes affectionately called the operating budget. So Carl, yes, I'm looking at Cliff and calling you Carl. So Cliff, back to the podium. We can have an updated review now.
Thank you. I will please encourage the committee and the community to pay attention to the governing board meeting on Thursday. We will be providing an additional item in the capital improvement budget coming out of our strategic planning, and it's regarding master plan and funds that we're going to request in the budget for master planning. So I'm just kind of teasing that a little bit. Please pay attention to Friday. Okay? Thursday, sorry. Okay, so not too much to report in terms of changes to the operating budget that's being proposed. Ultimately, we put a budget together for golf, and we went to the golf committee and discussed that, and we looked at the fees, and we looked at how we get to where we need to be in terms of the golf overall budget. And we made some changes. The golf committee was more interested in building the increases to the rates rather than hitting the range balls and creating a trail fee. So we took their recommendation and changed the budget. Again, there's no impact in terms of dollars in total, but how we get there has changed a little bit. So you can see here, I just tried to put it like a red line. Anywhere you see red is a change. Ultimately, the impact of the budget is the same, but basically taking our non-members and increasing their rate to $6 during peak season, and then and then implementing an increase during our transition season, which is kind of the shoulder seasons before we go to between off-peak and peak season, and that's May and October. So doing a $3 increase in our transition to non-members seasons. And then a $1 increase was proposed for the members during peak season. We're going to also put that $1 increase during transition season for the members. So ultimately, that gets us to where we had what we had proposed in total for golf in terms of revenue. So those are the changes in the golf proposed increases to the budget. So ultimately, and this kind of goes back to Mr. Bach and his question, and that is, how does the revenue, how do the inflows get spent? Well, here you can see we've got our total operating inflow, or balance budget, approximately 31 million, and then we've got our inflows to the reserve, which are our APF fees, the estimated reserve fund allocation from member dues, and then the reserve fund change, interest income and dividends of 981,000. That's going to create an $8.1 million cash inflow for us to pay for the $5.6 million proposed, as it stands, capital improvement budget. And so whatever's left after we get our budget approved and after we pay for those projects will be the difference between 8.1 million and whatever the capital improvement budget is, which right now stands at approximately 5.6 million. And then this year, we're projecting 7.9 million in inflows, and we've got a $10.9 million capital improvement budget in this fiscal year of FY25. So we'll need to pull from our reserve fund the difference between the 7.9 million and the capital expenditures for this year. So that's kind of how it works with the reserve fund and how we do that. We fund everything out of the operating account. We finish the year. We get our audit. CLA does the calculation for us. We know what it is, but they kind of certify it. And then we do that transfer by December. Okay, so that's how that works. Important dates are here. And obviously you're the B&F committee, so I don't really need to tell you that. So other than that, I really don't have any changes in the proposed budget, so I'm here to answer any questions in this committee and the community.
Excellent. And again, thank you for, and I want to thank our committee as well. My fellow committee members joined me, some in person and some watched the playback, but we were all very involved in and aware of the detailed discussions at the golf committee, and as well as the sports pavilion committee meetings. So we really, we're grateful for that. I got to hear, and we all got to hear the details of why those changes and how the fee, like the golf fees in particular, the revenues remain the same, but the nature of where the revenues will come from was very important to golf. So it was great to hear that discussion that came to fruition there. Want to call the committee's attention to not only the items that you provided, but specifically for the operating budget. If you look at the financial plan that's in our decks, there are 2 pages of assumptions. I think, yeah, just 2. So as we head into our April 1st go-around of initial recommendations for the operating budget, I want to call our attention to those assumptions, right? There are goals and objectives and actually 1 page of assumptions. I apologize. So things around the member dues, what's driving some of these forecasts for next year, really critical. So if you haven't already, take a look at those. That's, again, where we need to be making sure that we're comfortable with some of those assumptions. We heard some of this as well. I want to call out, Cliff, I did a back of the envelope calculation. Those are always dangerous, I know. But when we're talking about the dues increase, we're talking about a net increase of in the vicinity of $788,000, I believe, right? And the actual numbers will change because the operating budget presentation changes. You get the idea. Divide that by the number of residents and you'll see, relatively speaking, dollar for dollar, how much money each dollar of the proposed $28 increase I believe, is somewhere in the vicinity of $25,000 to $30,000 of either revenue or expense. So for the committee, you can do your own calculations, but if you're starting to think about, well, what's driving the dues increase, and you'd like to look at ways to make an impact to that, it has to be a fairly substantial impact. So if you're looking at the assumptions as well as the underlying numbers, you're looking at numbers that would be fairly substantial as you're looking for those. And we're combing through everything as you analyze with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that these numbers look good to us. We're looking for holes, but just wanted to call out some of those assumptions and some of the numbers as well. So with that, we'll turn it back over. This time we'll go to you, David, since Rick stole your thunder last time. Anything on the operating budget that you want to ask questions on today, based on what you just heard?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to comment, you touched upon it, is that I attended both the Sports Pavilion and the Golf Committee meeting. I know some of my other members did too, of this committee. And I think the members of the community have to realize that there's a lot of work that comes down at those grassroots levels. And these changes were because of the information they had received from the members in the community to make these recommended changes, and then they work their way up. So it is a grassroots-driven operations budget that has input from the members, from their sources that they have of these different committees, and they made the changes. And there was a long discussion, especially in the Golf Committee. Congratulations to them for doing that work. There's a lot of work and activity that went on there during that meeting.
Thanks for calling that out. A lot of work goes into that, more so than we may be aware. So hats off to all of our committees. Rick?
Number one is I'm glad to see they're pushing more of the revenue towards the non-members. I guess I'm a golf junkie and I see what other courses charge and play there. And I had friends come here and they paid, I think it was like $72 per round. I went back and played their course, which was in worse condition than any of ours. I paid $160. So I'm glad we're pushing back on that. The other thing is that there's a thing that gets me a lot about the proposed increases and all that. Is there some way that when you sign your papers, when you buy your house here, that you've gone through and seen what facilities we offer and where you're operating, your dues are going every year? Because there's such a misconception as to where this money goes and how it's just blown away. But if you see what you actually get behind the scenes, this is a great deal. So
I know that Cliff can answer, but I'm only going to say all of that was presented to me. There's a beautiful packet that says, what do my dues support, right? Everything was in what I signed, that's for sure. I'm just saying, I'm not saying, it doesn't mean that folks read it, but we all see it.
So yeah, I would say in line with the strategic plan that we have, one of the things on our initiatives is how do we market better, and the website is one of those things. Having more resources there, and just doing a better job of telling our story. I think we need to do that, and we've gotten that feedback from various people, and there's some things we're going to do from the marketing side. We're looking at all of our materials currently, updating those, and trying to create a better way of telling our story. One of the things that we also have to talk about is our member dues. Some of you have asked me for some historical information on those. And if you look at that, I mean, we've historically had if you take the last 20 years, it averages a 6% increase per year in our member dues. When you look from 2004 through 2024, the average increase is 6%. And I think people need to understand when they inherit a home, or if they move into this community, if they purchase a home, that the costs for operating the facilities do increase. Just like all the costs in their normal lives, they increase. If they were in business or they had a business, they increased their fees for the services that they provided. They didn't just say, well, you know, I'm going to go ahead and absorb the cost for me to do business. Okay, that's capitalism. That's how it works. So our costs go up, and therefore we need to make sure our members are planning for that as well. It's just the right thing to do, and we need to I think we need to communicate that better as well. We do need to communicate that, hey, you know, it's a great value, and we have an annual budgeting process where we assess everything, and there's a potential for a dues increase, and here's what's happened over time, just to show that. So that's part of the marketing. So Rick, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's important, and Stephen thinks it's important as well. We've been actually talking about those things. And
That's a great
making some
idea.
changes.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I would second Rick's comment and your answer. It's a great deal, and anything we can do to remind our residents what a great facility we have, I think would be awesome. Regarding the budget, I don't have any specific questions, but the process is thorough and it's working, and it looks doing a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Ed?
Yeah, I've been watching BNF for probably 12 years, and I would say back when I started, the process probably met the requirements, but now I see that the communication not only meets it, but exceeds it. When I personally have had a question, I wasn't told, well, we'll get back to you, and they don't get back to you. They get it, they communicate, nothing's hidden, and I think that, you know, it's probably not perfect, but I think you've gone a long ways to make the communication of trying to understand all the numbers in a way that's, for me, easier than it used to be. So because of that, I don't have the questions, but I just like to give you a little, that I think it's better, and you're always looking to try to do things better. So I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Thank you. I would say that a lot of that just comes from the feedback from the community. So the more engagement we get, the better opportunity we have to explain what we do. And I think Director Novello and recent governing boards and committees have done a great job of holding us you know, accountable by asking questions to help us tell the story, because, you know, we're finance people. Sometimes we don't do a good job of that, and I've been told that. So I want to make sure that we're doing it, and I appreciate all the things. One of the things I would say too that we need to do a better job of, that I'm working on, is, if you remember, we had a presentation on our reserve study a couple of months ago, and one of the things that kind of escapes the story, or doesn't get told very well, is that reserve study and what the impact of that, what happens to that when you apply, for example, inflation to it. You know, I said this in the last meeting, the last presentation, but we have a current cost of over $100 million in our reserve study, and 1 year of inflation on that is $3 million. So we're already starting $3 million in the hole in terms of the cost of replacing, the total cost of replacing all of our assets on a yearly basis. That has to be funded in our FFB %. And so that's another reason why we can't just fund our capital spend with our APFs. We have to have an injection from our member dues. It just has to happen. We can't just look at the bank balance and go, boy, we've got 30 million in the bank, we're in good shape. We have to look at the fully funded balance percentage and what we have in our reserve fund. And that tells us how healthy that balance is. So, you know, that's one of the things that we're striving to do as well, is to explain that to the community so they understand that it's not just about, you know, the operating budget isn't only about operating the facilities, it's also making sure we have an injection into our reserve fund. So I hope we're doing a better job of that as well.
Thanks, Cliff, and thanks for the feedback there, Ed. I'm going to ask a question about, I'm going to go there. So assumptions, number 7 on wages, right? We've had a number of questions on the pool of increase, right? So just to call it out, went and did some research as well on what's happening across the economy and the industry. So leading consultants and so forth are predicting or projecting that this year's overall wage increases in the area of merit would be somewhere, and this is really broad, this is for the entire country, but a really broad, between 3.5 to 3.9% is the general. So again, we're predicting, or we're projecting, forecasting, requesting 4% in terms of, for our team. It's not that far out of the realm of possibility. But we've learned, just to kind of review for all of us, we've learned over the past few weeks that, as a reminder, the question of merit increases really pertains to more both our salaried employees and to our non-minimum wage employees. Minimum wage employees will receive increases that are more closely tied to that budgeted increase that's mandated from the state. So things like most of the increases around wages, we really don't have, or in that bucket of wage increase, we don't have a lot of influence. We have to forecast those and budget for them. The merit increase has gotten some scrutiny from residents and board alike. So Cliff, if we could, if for the governing board and for this committee as well, because we need to be looking at some of the nuances, if you can take a look at that, and I don't expect you know it, but then again, you know a lot of things off the top of your head. What component of that bucket, if you will, would be subject to, if we decided to recommend a smaller bucket for merit increase, it doesn't mean that you could still have the 4% or implement whatever you wish. What's the implication, and what would be the dollar amount if we took that one component and took it down to, say, 3.5%?
Okay. I believe the impact of 1% is about $65,000 in the budget.
Okay. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, 35, depending on if it went by 0.5% down. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And again, just to caution everyone, right, this wouldn't be anyone recommending how to treat or compensate our employees, but rather how much of that we would fund. How that is passed along to employees would be in the hands of our management team. That was, I just wanted to know the specifics around that. It's something that I was considering specifically, so I'm just going to make my...
So Christine, what I think you're saying is what is mandated by the increase in the minimum wage, that is already given. We have to do that.
Exactly.
The other would be a discretionary increase on what the management team thinks.
Exactly right. And that's, and it's important to remember, Rick, that we are competing, and I know I'm preaching to the converted, but if you will, but we're competing for the best and brightest of our staff across everything, not just across our neighboring communities, but also with everything that's happening in the entire West Valley or all of Arizona to attract our resources and to retain these wonderful people once we hire them. So I'm in favor of continuing to treat our employees well, including wage increases. It's just more a matter of we're all trying to look at the finer points. I wanted to assure some of us in the community as well that the 4% increase that is being budgeted for, requested by the team, is not outside of the realm of what's considered feasible across the industry. Again, what I've read very broadly is somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 to 3.9, so we're in that neighborhood. So thanks for that, for being so precise. I just wanted to know a little bit more about the variability there. The rest of the assumptions seem to me to be pretty clear. We've talked about them over and over again, and really just looking at that fine-tooth comb for me. Any questions from our owner members in the room? We do have someone coming up. And again, we don't have any questions yet online. And although this owner member knows very well what to do, sign in and your name and rec card number, please.
David Bennett, 137887. I just had a question if there had been any consideration charging a APF like we do a flat fee now But then also on top of that, a percentage, the more expensive houses get a little bit extra that they would contribute based on the selling price of the house.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, we've not considered that. I mean, if you move into this community, if you buy a $300,000 house or you buy a $700,000 house, the amenities you get does not change.
Right.
So you still have access to the same amenities. Personally, I think the buy-in should be the same, to be honest.
I think that's,
I
and
don't-
that's
that would
pretty
be
typical
maybe
as
a
well,
board
but
initiative. Sometimes they're percentage, based on a percentage in certain communities.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure if that gives you additional resources or not, but for us, it wouldn't.
for, right, for this community, it would appear that what we use our dues for is pretty consistent across all members. So I understand the input. Thanks for the question.
Dennis Hansel, 111074. Can you put that chart up showing our projected revenues and expenses?
On the budget?
That's correct.
Yeah, budget.
This one?
Yes, can you make it a little larger? There you go. Can you tell me what is the reserve fund change? What is the reserve fund change?
Is the question, Mr. Hansel, what's the projected, this is the forecast for
Can you
next year?
define for me what the reserve fund change is?
Yeah.
Oh, that line, I apologize. Go ahead.
Sure, based on the budget, this doesn't have any valuation changes in it, unrealized or realized, so we don't budget for those. But if you look at the reserve fund change, that's the interest and dividends that we anticipate coming
So that
into the reserve
represents
fund.
the passive income derived from the reserve fund investment.
Yes.
Okay. And is there any policy regarding the estimated reserve fund allocation as a percent of operating revenues?
The only policy regarding the reserve fund allocation, there's a bylaw stating that there is a reserve fund allocation, and there's a policy in our annual financial plan that states we set the percentage in the budget process and that it gets approved as part of the annual financial plan.
Can you give me that specific policy that addresses that?
FY15?
Okay, and that refers to a specific percentage?
No, it refers to just the establishment of a percentage each year that is communicated and approved as a part of this process.
Okay, thank you.
So no, the specifics are not there. You're correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see one that has come in online. Gary Buck, 135435. I believe the 4% is not guaranteed, but is a max. Is that correct? Yes, Gary, that is correct. I can answer that one. This is more, it establishes a pool from which the salary increases will be derived. And the operating team has set a maximum for any employee, I believe, of 4% next year. That's not something that's up for our discussion, but rather it's the creation of the fund. Did I misstate anything? I'm looking
Oh,
to our,
no,
yeah.
that sounds, I don't know that we've set the actual maximum percent yet, but the 4%, keep in mind, goes to pay for the merit increases as well as the other things impacting our payroll structure, which could be compression issues, job changes, job market analysis. That's what that pool of money goes to address. So we haven't, I mean, it could be 4%, but we really haven't set that yet in
Right.
our cycle yet.
What's up, what we can recommend and what the governing board will approve is the size of that pool. And we have the recommendation that's come in from our team, so thanks for that. But it is a max, it is not a guarantee. And the only thing from a salary perspective that I'm aware of that is, if you will, mandated is that change in minimum wage, right? That's, if not guaranteed, I guess that would be, that's what's given to us from the outside.
Correct.
We have another question, I believe, that's queued up in the room.
We have a transfer fee that Sun City West receives upon the purchase of a property. I think it's $275. Is that reflected in the budget?
Yes.
Where is that?
Membership revenue.
Okay, it's not associated with the asset preservation fees?
It's in the operating budget as membership revenue.
Since it's similar to the asset preservation fee in that it's generated when a house is purchased, wouldn't it be more appropriate that it go to capital funds as reserve?
No.
Well, I disagree.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Thanks for the response, Cliff. Any other questions in the room? Final questions from our... Okay, so again, Budget and Finance Committee members, those here as well as those that will be watching this later. Our task is to comb through all of these items, and again, we'll make our initial recommendations at our April 1st meeting. I say initial on this one because the governing board may still make some revisions that we will have to consider. So we may have a little bit of back and forth on that, but our charge is to make the initial round of recommendations to the governing board on the operating budget as well at our April 1st meeting. And we'll do that in a, not the same fashion, but similar fashion, where I will ask you all as committee members to contribute your thoughts in advance, so we can aggregate those in advance and expedite the discussion. It's not to say we will not discuss. We will still discuss, but we'll have something to go with rather than just open discussion. Thank you, Cliff. So that wraps up 3.03 on the annual financial plan for today. 3.04, nothing to look at, but a quick update that I'll give you on the investments working group progress. As we've been mentioning, we've gone through and actually looked at all the things that we've decided as a Budget and Finance Committee on changes that we'd like to consider making. It's a lot harder to make targeted updates to the policy than it may appear on paper, but we've gone through and discussed those. So I'm going to create the red line for the working group to look at. Once we've gotten that down, we will come back into one of our committee meetings in April to review that and to make a recommendation to the governing board. I'm saying one of our meetings because our goal is always to keep these committee meetings something that's workable for all of us. We have a pretty big agenda for April 1st. If we have completed our reviews and are comfortable with the red line, it will go into that agenda, or it will go into the one following. But it will be one of our upcoming meetings in April. But you, as a committee, will see that in advance so that you can contribute. So again, good progress being made. We're at the point of redlining the policy, which is great news. We don't expect, as a part of the recommendation, to change FI4. We're really focusing in on some targeted changes to FI12, which is the specific investment policy. So that's where we are with that review. You look forward to seeing that in April as well. Any questions from our community on that one? From the committee? Thanks again to Rick and to Mickey for taking that hard task on, but we're nearing the point of making a recommendation, which is exciting. So that wraps up 3.04. Holy moly, look at the time. This is great. So we're going to go around now and ask for some committee comments. I'll start with you, John.
I have no comments.
Rick?
No comments at this time, so.
Thank you. David?
The only comment I want to say is that I appreciate when the members of the community, either through the online or when they're here present reading, bringing questions forward, because I think that bringing those questions forward make us think sometimes differently, and that's what we look forward to. And it doesn't mean that every time we're going to agree, but that's part of the governing process. And so,
It is.
again, I appreciate in the other committee meetings I've been at too, there's been a lot of input, and that's how good governance works. So thank you to all those that do participate at that level.
Well said. And Ed, any comments or questions?
No further comments, thanks.
Excellent. Any questions from the community that are here or online? I'll add a few comments of my own then, sort of building off of what David and others have said. We love having members of the community come here and ask questions and to question us and to question everything. That's what this is all about. If you're watching this afterwards and you have questions, there is no way to chat those questions in. My email address is christine.novello@suncitywest.com. I'll make sure that that question gets routed to the right individual, whether it's Cliff or a member of his team, or to the governing board or to the committee as a whole. But we're really open to hearing your questions and comments. The whole point is to participate in the process, and we're grateful for that. So questions to me, anything that you may have, are always welcome. We're going to have a wonderful meeting coming up in April, as I mentioned. So just to make sure that we're there, our next committee meeting is scheduled for April 1st. No kidding. April 1st, 2025, right here, 9 a.m. in the lecture hall. Please join us there, and any questions to us in advance are always welcome. I adjourn this meeting at 10:37.